try and get us wrapped up in about an hour and a half, so 8:30 or so. My 2 rules regarding meeting length: if it goes past an hour and a half, there has to be food, and I didn't bring food, and no meeting goes past 2 hours. So you'll absolutely be out of here by 9, hopefully by 8:30. We did introductions. Let's talk a little bit why we're doing this plan. Now, those of you that have been involved in plans before know what a comprehensive plan is, and maybe a little bit of the whys, but basically this is your one-stop shop for the future of your community. You want this plan to represent the community's goals and desires for the future in terms of infrastructure, in terms of development, land use, administration, really just thinking about how this community operates and grows into the future. And not all communities grow, but obviously we all know, several people use the word potential, and that's the word I would use as well for Cecil. There's lots of opportunity here for growth. So we really want to think about how that growth is going to be managed going into the future successfully to promote economic development in a managed way.
How many years into the future?
Well, comprehensive plans should be done every 10 years and updated every 5. Realistically, and there's been a push statewide to kind of focus these plans to make it, there's a buzzword, implementable comprehensive plans. I'd say all plans should be implementable, so I'm not sure it needs a buzzword. But our goal is to have a plan that will begin momentum. This process will begin some momentum towards implementation and have strategies that can be implemented in the next 5 years with the thought that it will lay out the next 10 years of full growth.
Is that what we're looking at, the 10-year projections?
So one of the big reasons why you do comprehensive plans is to set yourself up for future, I'll call financial planning, both in terms of grant writing and in terms of how the community, how the township plans for budgeting into future years. It's always a tough nut to crack to make sure that you strike a good balance between enticing development through your taxes and your low taxes, but you also want to make sure you have enough revenue to generate, be able to sustain and manage the growth long term. So not to say that we're going to do detailed tax number crunching as much as Janet would like to do so, but we are going to think about what the long-term implications are of the types of development that we could get and what the financial ramifications of those might be in terms of how the township actually operates and functions long term. So in terms of grant writing, the comprehensive plan is a really good tool to tee up projects, and it's really about priorities. The biggest challenge communities have is identifying and sticking to priorities. People always ask me how I'm able to be successful in communities where we get grants. You know, and in this day and age, there's not a ton of grant money out there, but there is grant money out there. And elected officials often ask, well, how do we get the grant money? And it's not that, I try to make it sound more complicated than it really is, but it's really not that complicated. You have to know what you want and be organized about going about getting it. And that's really it. So if we have a plan in place that says our number one priority is to rebuild this interchange at such and such a road, and we know how we're going to go about doing it, those are the grants that get funded. The communities take a big step forward and say, these are our priorities, we've rallied people around these priorities, and we actually have done some planning to say, this is how we're going to accomplish these priorities. And that may involve a little bit of risk. You might do some preliminary engineering, for example, for an interchange that you may never get funded. But those are the interchanges that do get funded through grant money eventually. So that's really an important reason to do a comp plan.
I'm sorry, can I ask, do we have a grant writer?
I don't believe so. We've been searching for one for many years, and yeah, we have to work on that.
Good, just wondering. I work in a nonprofit, so I know a lot about grant writing and that kind of stuff, so just wondering.
You'd be working more, right? If your husband...
It depends, maybe, we'll see. Yeah.
Maybe this is an opportunity.
We shall see.
But no, yeah, having somebody, whether it's a designated grant writer or whether that function is spread out across multiple staff people and consultants, just identifying the projects and identifying about how you're going to go about implementing them and being organized with the grant writing process is important. So it's good. It's a good
where you can take a page out of your comprehensive plan and show it as a goal of your community and then attach that to a grant.
Right.
That's a huge plus.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, we just got a huge grant today at my work, and one of the biggest reasons we got it, we applied for it at the very last minute, and one of the reasons we got it was because it was a program that we've had in place for 12 years.
Right.
And, you know, some of our newer programs get denied, but this program we've had in place for 12 years, it's super underfunded, but, you know, it's shown progress for the past 12 years, and it's an amazing program. And it got this huge grant today, but it only took us 3 days to put this grant together because, you know, it's Yeah, it was a winner. It's just,
Cool.
yeah.
Congrats on the grant.
Oh, thanks. It was a big one.
So in your folder, you also have a copy of the scope of work, and I just want to quickly go through and give you some highlights to you, understanding of what it is that we're going to accomplish. Any questions in terms of what the comprehensive plan is? At the end of it, we're going to have a whole lot of great mapping from Gateway. We've got a lot of institutional knowledge from an infrastructure planning standpoint that we're able to pull from through Dan and his folks at Gateway. A lot of good mapping, background information, and really I want to focus on that prioritization, the consensus building and the prioritization. I'm not interested in doing a history of Cecil. If that's what you're looking for, we need to maybe realign our priorities, because I'm not the person to help you do that. I think history is important, I'm sure, and I hope that you have a historical society that's active in the community. But we don't need 500 pages of the history of Cecil. We'll reference any existing documents. Our goal is identify priorities and build consensus around them and figure out how we're actually going to accomplish them. Yes, sir.
John, you had a request of persons wanted to see the last existing comprehensive plan. Maybe we could work towards that, maybe each a copy or so for the next meeting or sometime. Or is that an advantage to use, or would you rather?
I think it's somewhat of a good starting point, but wouldn't want to get bogged down in where we left off and what we did or didn't accomplish.
It's 20 years old, right?
Yeah, that's, I had a recording secretary, that is so old and so lost in space compared to where we are now. It would only hurt us maybe.
What was the one that was recently worked on? Was that, you said anything about the other one?
No, it was never implemented.
Okay, so how many years ago was that?
The last one you guys worked
Do you
on, it
remember
didn't
my
get
money
implemented. Yeah, right.
There was, I forget
It was, the last one that really advanced pretty far was the one that it was through a grant also on the comp plan. It was combined with Canonsburg. And remember, it didn't fit well. They were funding joint plans. And it didn't fit well. Mackin was worked on it. It got so far along and it fizzled.
Okay.
Yeah, those are hard. There was a real big push several years ago to do the joint planning, and there's a lot of value and reasons to do joint planning, but if it's
I
not
just
a
think
good
that this
fit,
community can stand on its own now.
It's so different now.
right.
Yeah, it really is.
Dan, this was the one that we did in June of 2015.
Yes, and we have that
It
draft.
never got completed though, it never got.
Yeah, that's about, that's probably 15% of a plan. It's a lot of the background data that's collected up, so we'll use that.
The stuff that you just said really didn't need to be
Yeah,
done.
we're getting that information off of that consultant. He did and invoiced the township for that portion of the work, so we're going to capitalize on as much of that background information as possible going forward. That was figured into John's proposal.
So in terms of the scope of the work and your role, as I said earlier, is the hub, a clearinghouse in a sense. We do want to engage a lot of the community in terms of stakeholders, residents, businesses, and we'll do outreach to do that. But we also need to try and bring that information to one spot so we can all review it and formulate that into priorities and recommendations that ultimately end up in the plan. It's not to say that you're the final decision makers or arbiters, but this group will be the group that recommends the plan go to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will do their review, and they will make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors for adoption. So in terms of the scope, you will touch all of these pieces. You'll see the results of all these pieces. We did do the tour last week. We are, as we said, getting the information in terms of review of the draft plan. We're getting the information from the prior consultants. We'll update that information. And the bottom half of page 1 is the outreach and engagement. So we'll meet with you folks 6 times is currently planned. And we can work on more if needed. And we also meet with the Planning Commission a couple of times. We'll do a survey and do some stakeholder interviews. But as I said, as we collect all that information, that will all funnel to you all to review and help prioritize some of the information that we're collecting from residents and stakeholders. On the back page, we'll do a public input summary to distill all that information. And then when we get towards the end and the priorities and the recommendations begin to crystallize, we'll put together a small group that will focus on implementation. And that might involve staff, elected officials, a couple of folks in this group to really just talk about the nuts and bolts of, okay, how are we actually going to get these top priority recommendations accomplished? So we can be very specific to Cecil Township in terms of how we rate those.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, do we have 3 corridors, or do we have 4? Like Miller's Run, Morganza Road, and 980, and I don't know if Georgetown's one.
Where's
That's
Georgetown come off of Morganza?
Let's see, a corridor is supposed to take you through all municipalities. I didn't know if it was so Miller's Run comes all the way from Bridgeville out to, what is that? Through Mount Pleasant. And then Morganza comes from Bridgeville, from Washington Pike, all the way to Norster Bank. And then we have 980, that's really a crucial one now too, because it comes from Cannonsburg and goes all the way to McDonald's.
Right.
But how about Georgetown Road? It only goes to Valley Brook. I mean, is there a corridor there, do you think?
Well, how about we open up, that's maybe a good segue. How about we open up our maps and we talk about, one of the things I did want to do is sort of orient ourselves. And what I'd like to do is if you were going to draw a map of Cecil with your eyes closed or on the back of a napkin, we want to do exactly what Janet talked about. What are the definable areas, whether they're corridors or villages, pockets, unincorporated villages, that kind of thing. So let's just talk, and I'll just make a few notes, and we'll actually maybe create a map or a markup of that, but I'd like to jot down your thoughts on what those corridors and places are. So can you start over, Janet? So what are the corridors?
I'm just throwing out Miller's Run Road for one.